The world was soft and cold, like cotton soaked in ice water. Amelia floated there weightless, her thoughts scattered like dandelion seeds in the wind. She remembered the sharp snap of the car's brakes, the screech of tires, and the brief, searing pain before it all dissolved into this endless quiet. There was no light at the end of a tunnel, no judgment waiting for her, only a vast, grey nothing. Then came the whispers. Faint and distant, they curled around her, speaking words she couldn't understand. At first they were like echoes in a canyon, but slowly they sharpened, their voices threading together into a single chilling command. Return. Amelia tried to protest. She wanted to rest, to stay in this stillness, but the whispers became a roar, dragging her back, tearing her free from the void. She gasped as her chest heaved, her body jerking violently on the hospital bed. The blinding white of the fluorescent lights above burned her eyes. Nurses and doctors scrambled around her, their faces etched with shock. She was gone for 7 minutes, someone muttered. Amelia's throat was raw, her limbs heavy, but something felt wrong, different. She reached for the oxygen mask on her face, pushing it aside as her fingers trembled. The room seemed too bright, too loud, every sound and movement grating against her senses. And then she noticed her reflection in the dark screen of a dormant monitor. Her eyes weren't the soft hazel they had always been. They were black, endless and deep, like the void she'd just escaped. "Amelia," the nurse whispered cautiously. "Are you okay?" She opened her mouth to respond, but the whispers returned, this time inside her head. They hissed and snarled, commanding her to do things she didn't understand. A deep chill ran through her, and a faint, inhuman grin tugged at the corners of her mouth. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice not entirely her own. Something had come back with her, and it wasn't leaving. The hospital room seemed to stretch unnaturally, the walls breathing as if alive. Shadows flickered in the corners, but there was no light to cast them. Amelia sat up slowly, ignoring the protests of the nurse. Her body felt foreign, her limbs stiff, like a marionette's strings had just been yanked. "Amelia, you need to lie down," the nurse insisted, reaching for her. The moment the nurse's hand touched her, Amelia felt it, a pulse of something cold and dark surging through her veins. The whispers inside her head grew louder, like a swarm of insects crawling behind her skull. Without thinking, she grabbed the nurse's wrist. "Don't," Amelia said. Her voice was flat, hollow, yet it carried a weight that made the nurse freeze in place. The lights above flickered. The heart monitor by the bed crackled and spat static. The air turned icy. "She's not alone," the nurse whispered, her face draining of colour. Amelia didn't know what she meant until she looked down. Black veins spidered up her arm from where she gripped the nurse, pulsing with a life of their own. The nurse let out a strangled cry, yanking her hand back, but it was too late. A dark stain began spreading across her skin, as if the very essence of Amelia's touch had infected her. Amelia slid off the bed, her bare feet hitting the cold tile floor. She felt stronger now, more aware. Every sound in the hospital echoed in her ears. Footsteps down the hall, a baby crying 3 floors up, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. And beneath it all, the whispers, whispering things she didn't want to understand. She looked at the nurse, now slumped against the wall, her eyes wide and unseeing, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. A thin black liquid oozed from the corners of her mouth. "I didn't mean to," Amelia whispered, taking a step back. The nurse's head snapped toward her, too fast, her neck bending at an impossible angle. Her mouth opened wide, far wider than it should have, the jaw unhinging like a snake's. From deep within her throat came a guttural, rasping laugh. "You brought us back," the nurse croaked, but the voice wasn't hers. It was layered, guttural, and filled with malice. Amelia stumbled back, her hands trembling as the whispers turned into a deafening roar. The shadows in the room thickened, creeping toward her like living things. She wanted to scream, to cry out for help, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness inside her. The door to the room slammed shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot. And then, as the shadows engulfed her completely, Amelia realized one terrible truth. She hadn't just returned from death. She'd opened the door for something far worse, and it was hungry.
I hope you enjoyed this short story. If you did, please consider leaving a like, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing for more stories.